This is Design Safe Radio, where natural hazards researchers strive to make our society more resilient to everything nature throws at us.
How do we as engineers, like, and homeowners, right? Like we've both got houses here in Oregon. Like, how do you communicate what homeowners and policy owners need to know about wildfire risks, like prevention? Like, do I need to knock down the blackberries behind my fence? I mean, I probably do anyway, but like,
yes, you should probably do that, Dan.
just in general. But recovery, mitigating these post-fire effects like landslides, the water contamination that you mentioned. What are some recommendations and ways you're approaching this in terms of how you talk to homeowners and policymakers?
Sure. Yeah. So I was involved at the beginning stages, actually, of Senate Bill 762 here in Oregon, which is the implementation of an omnibus wildfire mitigation plan in Oregon. So we went through the steps of defining the wildland and urban interface for the state of Oregon. So that's the first part, is you need to define what is the wildland urban interface for your state. So each state is willing to define it a little bit differently, and it's different because they might use the word home or they might use the word structure.
Oh yeah.
And so the two are very different, right? So
yes, they are. All homes are structures, but not all structures are homes.
Exactly. Your shed, your barn, these are also structures that might be on the same property. So we went through that exercise of defining it, then mapped the state of Oregon, and then defined different risk categories. And so what that allows us to do is to begin to have the conversation with, just as, for all other hazards, right? You have low risk all the way to very high risk, right? You can be in a very low seismic area. It still means there is a potential for seismicity. It's just a low risk, all the way up to, San Francisco, Seattle. So we need to be able to put our communities in these buckets to be able to have that conversation of what is your risk. Now that has been done, then you can start requiring mitigation in certain areas of the state or in the community. And different communities kind of take this in different strides.
Yeah.
And I would say
I can imagine some folks, say maybe outside the I-5 corridor, not reacting super well to that. We love them.
Yes.
We care about them.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it, though, is change. And a lot of it is that it costs money. And so one thing that Oregon did, which is just really exceptional, is they provided resources to socially vulnerable communities. And not just money resources, but also, like person power to help clear your land, right? So sometimes it's not just money, you need like physical resources.
Yeah.
And so that is something that the state did, and that is really exceptional and a really great example. What we tell communities today is that they should make sure they have very limited to no combustible material within 5 feet of their home, that they replace their siding with something like hardy board or hardy plank siding. They use non-combustible roofing material, that they use vent screens so that you can prevent ember intrusion. You have at least double pane windows, and all of this, what this does, everything has an ignition point. Everything can ignite or degrade with fire. But all of these parameters, what it does is it de-intensifies the fire as it encroaches towards your house. So it lowers your demand while at the same time increasing your capacity towards that fire. So you're increasing your fire capacity of your home while also decreasing the fire exposure demand to your home. So if we kind of think in the typical structural engineering demand and capacity, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to, decrease that demand and increase that capacity. Now, where things get complicated or maybe frustrating, I think, for communities is that when it comes to hazards such as, wind or earthquakes, we as structural engineers have a wealth of knowledge to be able to go to someone's home and say, mitigate this first. This is your biggest bang for your buck. You should
Yeah.
do this first.
Reinforce your garage door.
Yeah, yeah. Or
Done.
build your home to your foundation,
Yeah.
things like that. But unfortunately in fire, we are just starting to perform all the experiments to really understand how each individual mitigation measure impacts the risk of the house and can reduce the risk of the house. And so we're not able to really tell homeowners, do this first, do this second, do this third. And so that's where the research is coming. And it can be a little bit frustrating for communities because we ask them to do a lot and it costs a lot of money.
Yeah. And then you get into, well, is that going to make my house insurable? In a place like Bend or other places. I have a friend who has some rental properties and he's not able to get them insured anymore.
Yeah, there actually like in Oregon, there's a lot of bills that are trying to be passed to keep insurance companies in the state. And so they're doing Oregon's doing a lot of things right to try to learn from what's happening in other areas of the country with insurance companies pulling out. But it is really hard and I don't think these fires in LA are gonna really help us in
No.
that at all.
Yeah, and it requires everybody working together, right? It's not like the insurance companies are bad guys or anything. It's just, hey, they run a business, not a charity, and
Yeah,
it's
and that's
their responsibility to protect, not only their policyholders but their shareholders.
mhm.
That's their obligation, and so they're doing what they're designed to do, and then it's our job as engineers to say, hey, we can lower the risk with some
Yeah.
investment.
And that is one of the challenging things about wildfires is you could do all of these things that I'm telling you. You could put the hardy plank siding on, the non-combustible roof, the vent covers, you clear your property within 5 feet. But if none of your neighbors do that, you are not
Doesn't help you.
reducing your risk by
Yeah.
much. And so this is a hazard that is very much like infectious disease in a way is
Yeah.
you have to collectively mitigate. Everyone has to get vaccinated together or mitigate together to collectively reduce your risk. One person is not really going to make the difference. So it's a very much, the Nahiri community, we talk about community resilience all the time, for all these other hazards. And this hazard really just it's like the pinnacle of community resilience of that community part, where we all have to come together
Yeah.
to do it.
And even more than other mitigation efforts for other hazards like wind hazards and seismic, a lot of these mitigations that you're talking affect your daily life more of this is how my house looks, these are the kinds of trees and plants that I can or shouldn't have around my property, and there's a lot of history and tradition and emotion and community and all sorts of things tied up with all that, so it's a big
Yeah,
complex
I would
thing.
say like yes and no. I think that there is a perception that like the 200-year-old oak tree that's in front of your house is like the biggest threat.
No,
And it's
yeah,
not,
exactly.
you know?
It's
It's
not.
like you can keep the oak tree that your great grandfather planted
Yeah.
in your house. Like that's fine. You need to get rid of the bark mulch that's touching your home.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
that's how
Right.
he's doing it.
Right.
Look for wood pile. Like this is the stuff that needs to be moved. And what we're really lucky about is that, building materials have advanced so much.
Oh yeah.
You could have a fence that looks like it's wood and it's not wood. So you can get the aesthetic that you want without the fire hazard that
Right.
comes along with it.
Right. Yeah, and it's going to take, like our neighborhood was built in the 50s and 60s, and it's going to take everybody coming together and, other policy efforts and all the things you're working on, right, to make that happen. And we could still have a lovely, neighborhood where kids run around and people have,
Mhm. Hmm.
varied architecture and all the things that we love about our community. And when the next wildfire comes through here, we're not all going to burn down.
Yeah,
So
yeah, because
it'd
the
be
the
great.
holiday farm fire got really, really close to Eugene.
Really close.
Really close. So, I mean, when that was going on, Eugene had the worst air quality in the world at that moment in time. And so it's threatening our cities and our towns, and it's happening over and over again. And we need to continue to do mitigation in
Yeah.
wildland. That can't stop. It's just we now have all of these towns and cities that were built up in these high risk areas. And so we have to simultaneously mitigate in our communities.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point. That's not the focus of your research, but spoiler alert, we'll probably have some other guests on later that do is the air quality aspect. Like even if your house or structure doesn't burn, you still have effects from smoke, from air
Yeah.
quality, from ash,
Yeah.
from all these other things. There's like it's a multifaceted hazard in
Yeah.
ways that many others aren't.
Yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting is what's coming, like the reports coming out of LA that these passive homes performed really well. And so this is something that we're starting to look into, and we kind of started to look into it after the Marshall Fire. We noticed certain homes that we're so confused why they didn't burn. But, the area that was impacted by the Marshall Fire is where a lot of the wind turbines for the country are tested. It is an area that has a lot
Oh,
of high wind. And so
yeah.
those garage doors that you're talking about, are designed for high wind. And everything is sealed really well. So you didn't have ember intrusion as much as you have
Mm,
if this was somewhere else. So now when you look at like the LA fire and you look at these passive homes, they're designed to be completely sealed for air temperature control. And so the secondary effect of that is that they didn't allow ember intrusion. And so they performed really
ah,
well. So like I think I guess where I'm getting with this is there's a lot of mitigation that has happened that we don't even know is
right.
effective, so like understanding where's the overlap of that Venn diagram with other hazards, whether it's
Hmm.
sustainability and lowering carbon footprint, or whether it's wind, or earthquake or flood,
Hmm.
and it lessens the burden on the homeowner if they
Yeah,
understand how they can do one thing and it mitigates for multiple.
absolutely. Well, and in the case of a passive home, um, it has additional benefits, right? You know, energy savings that hits your wallet right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
A sealed home that is newly updated and looks really nice, higher resale values. Like you have these things that hit your bottom line, hit your wallet, and also mitigate against a hazard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we just like as engineers and those of us working, in this field, I think it's just, what can we do to make it just a little bit easier for
Yeah.
homeowners? The at least here in Oregon, it was 2015 when the New Yorker article came out that everything west of I-5 was toast, and
Yeah.
caused a
Like,
big
great. Thanks,
uproar.
guys.
Yeah, right. Big uproar in earthquake mitigation. That was less than 10 years ago. And
Hmm.
then you have, COVID-19 occurring in 2020, where, again, that's, another hazard that the state has to deal with. And then the fires in 2020, the Labor Day fires in 2020, passed by, Senate Bill 762 in 2021, the new wildfire hazard maps coming out. And it's just, the people are getting whiplash. What do they mitigate
Yeah.
for? Where are they supposed to spend their money? And it's overwhelming. So what can we do as engineers to, since we do understand these multiple hazards. We do understand the interdependencies of our infrastructure. What can we do to make this just a little bit easier and identify some of these co-benefits that homeowners can do to lower their risk in multiple categories
Yeah.
and save some money?
Yeah. This is getting me thinking about kind of.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Design Safe Radio. Be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you happen to be listening to this on. It really helps people find our show. Thanks to our amazing sponsors, the National Science Foundation and the NARI Network Coordination Office, which is award number 2129782. Big thank you to Marty LaChance, our guest booker and topic researcher extraordinaire, and Raquel Ruiz, who is our video and audio editor. I'm your host and NARI Facility Scheduling and Operations Coordinator, Dan Zahner. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay resilient.